Okay, I think we'll get started. Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Emma Lovell. I'm the head of marketing at Electron. And today I'm joined by Chris Broadhurst, who's our chief commercial officer, and Nick Hunt-Batch, who's our head of product. So quickly, just before I jump into the agenda, I'd like to go through some brief housekeeping. So today's session will be recorded and it will last around 30 minutes. We'll also send you the recording after the webinar, probably via email, so you can watch it as many times as you want and share it with the team. We'll also be answering questions at the end of the webinar. So there is a Q&A function available to use throughout. So just drop us a question and we'll do that one at the end. Perfect. Okay, so on to today's agenda. So first of all, we'll be giving a brief introduction to flexibility and to ourselves, Electron. We'll be looking at key developments throughout flexibility over the last 12 months, so 2023. Then we're going to drop it down into the main UK trends of 2023, and then the developments that we've seen throughout Europe and the US. And then we're going to look at the evolution of the DSO over the last 12 months and the next generation of flexibility. And we'll finish with our expectations for 2024. So I'm going to hand over to Chris, who's going to give a brief overview of flexibility and introduce you to us, Electron.
Great, thanks, Emma. Morning, everybody. So I thought I'd just start off with a really simple explanation of what is flexibility, and then explain who we are and what we do. So in really simple terms, flexibility just means adjusting demand and generation to help balance the network. And historically, we've used gas to do that, but clearly to get to net zero energy, we need to stop using gas and start using all these distributed energy resources like EVs and heat pumps and solar and battery. So to do that, we need to move away from that kind of historical command and control type approach to balancing the grid and moving to something that's more decentralized and technology enabled. And that's what we've been doing at Electron. So we provide a local flexibility market, Electron Connect, which allows system operators, so DNOs, DSOs, and TSOs, to meet and match up with distributed energy resources so they can come together and transact the energy when and where it's needed. So we've built that platform, Electron Connect, for scale. And so we spend a lot of time, Nick spends a lot of time, our head of product, thinking about how can we make it easier for providers and operators to use, how can we lower barriers to entry. And we also spend a lot of time trying to improve the levels of automation and integration with our platform and with the systems around us and in the DSO environment, but in the broader ecosystem, so that we can essentially make the network needs and the market capabilities much closer together. So it's all about making the existing network more efficient, connecting more low carbon technologies faster, and accelerating the energy transition while keeping costs low for everybody. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of what flexibility is, if you didn't know, and a bit about what we do. I'll hand over to Emma now, and she can move on to the next slide. So I think you're on mute, Emma.
That's really useful. Yeah, so Nick's going to kick us off with key developments that have happened in flexibility over 2023.
Yeah, thanks, Emma, and thanks, Chris, as well. So yeah, I mean, without getting carried away, I think 2023 has been quite an exciting year in flexibility, if that were possible. So obviously, quite high level with the stats on this slide, but of course, we've seen the demand flexibility service the beginning of this year, like last winter, and also obviously being approved again this winter, and obviously a lot of detail and complexity there. But I think it's fair to say that flexibility is now becoming part of the kind of mainstream conversation. Like, your nan will know about it. Maybe someone's telling her to change her usage of the system, or at least when she does things. But I guess what I mean is that now people are actually becoming aware of what flexibility is, like your end consumer more, and also it's the first step in kind of society changing how they engage with the energy system, and effectively that's what flexibility is. So potentially rewarding people to change their behavior, to be flexible, to benefit from the energy transition as we get more low carbon technologies, but also just in general changing our usage. So obviously with DFS, that actually being communicated down to your end consumer has been a key thing, as I say, beginning of this year and now at the end. If we look at the DSO level in the UK and GB, we can see an increasing amount of flexibility is being tendered across the system in the various DNO license areas. But we also, as a general comment, typically over the last few years, have seen that the contracted capacity hasn't quite kept up with where we need to be in terms of the system needs. So yeah, the system needs more flexibility, as Chris was mentioning, as more and more pressures are put on the distribution system, and being the distribution network is key to kind of net zero goals in terms of decarbonising mobility and heating, etc. We obviously need to access or engage more people in flexibility. But I think at this level, basically, it's clear this year has been a real inflection point in terms of it entering the mainstream conversation. So if you go to the next slide, please. So drilling down a level in the UK, getting a little bit more specific. A few things obviously have been going on this year, and I've just pulled out 5 here. Amongst the load, it's not exhaustive. There's been quite a lot going on. Obviously, we've already mentioned at the beginning of the year, the DFS, Demand Flexibility Service. Many events, but saving over 3,300 megawatt hours and ongoing. Just last week, or earlier this week, I should say, the OBP National Grid ESO's open balancing platform officially launched V1, which was very exciting, of course. So one of the main things that we saw on Tuesday was that they were able to issue many more small instructions as part of this so-called bulk dispatch capability. But that basically means that they were able to engage batteries and smaller BMUs and dispatch those. So it's a more effective use of those distributed energy resources, in that case, in the balancing mechanism. So that was a big step very recently at the end of this year. Moving down to the DSO level, earlier in the autumn, we saw the next kind of stage of the ENA's standardized DSO flexibility products, as they are. So obviously we've had the 4 standards for a while, and now there's been an update to that. So quite exciting for me, I think. Might just be me, but I think for me it represents a slight change in the way that we think about this. So obviously we've had those 4 standard products in the past, and they were kind of quite the way they were deployed across the various DNOs was quite varied. And I think this therefore represents a slight change of thinking in that each part of the distribution network, each license area, they have their own needs, system needs, and that's really to do with a few things, like is it in a city or rural, what type of people are connecting, what type of technologies are connecting, the kind of stage and the life cycle of how they're engaging with flexibility. So the system has its own unique set of needs and challenges. So rather than trying to force fit completely standard products and say this is how they must be deployed, it's kind of like a one size fits no one approach. What I see with this next phase of these standard products is to move something more like a menu, as it were. So that basically, by what I mean is that you can tailor from that menu, you can take things and tailor them to suit the needs of your system. So that's what I see with that next phase of the ENA standard products, and I think that's definitely the right way to go, is not to focus so much on it's a completely standard set of products which must be implemented in a rigid way, more to identify that there are different types of need of the system and then have the tools to be able to meet those. So yeah, that was earlier in the autumn. Moving down, second to last one there, maybe not so positive, but unfortunately this market-wide half-hourly settlement, MHHS, was further delayed out till 2026, I think, which is a shame. And I'm hoping that we can see more progress on that next year, because the benefits could be quite wide in terms of incentivizing consumers further to take control of their energy usage. It will allow the rollout of more innovative products from suppliers, perhaps, and that will therefore allow maximize the value of flexibility for the end consumer. It'll also potentially provide data on usage at the LV level that will obviously help with forecasting, etc. So bit of a shame, but let's hope for better things next year. And then the last one on the list, which I pulled out, which again was a couple of months back, is the code modification P415, which basically allows demand turned down into the wholesale market, which, yeah, at a very high level, that basically is another route to market, perhaps, for that. So lots more opportunities being made available to be flexible and get rewarded for it. And that's another one of those.
Nick, the last one on P415, it's something we've had questions from our DSO customers in the UK. Have you got any thoughts on how that impacts the procurement of flexibility and how they should think about it?
Yeah, I do, actually, as it turns out. Yeah, I mean, I kind of banged on there a little bit about the needs of the system operator, and having the tools to be able to identify those needs. And this is kind of relates to the flip side of that in terms of the provider today, the flexibility provider, but also those technologies and people who could be flexibility providers in the future that we haven't quite engaged with yet. It's about how do we present the different options to them and how do we make it attractive to respond or be flexible. So yeah, this is a route to market, another revenue stream perhaps. And yeah, you know, the more revenue stream opportunities there are, maybe the more kind of dispersed that flexibility gets amongst those routes. So the key point we need to ensure is that we're making our products, our services, attractive to lots of different types of provider at each level. So for DSOs, yep, there are different system needs, and there are ways that we can make products and services which are attractive to different cohorts of provider, whether it's long-term stable price signals to support business models and rolling out various technologies, or if it's something which is attractive to more variable loads which can't forecast too far ahead of time, and they want the agency of being able to look at various different price signals to respond to. So I think basically, yeah, it's a good thing. It's another route to market, and we just need to make sure that we make all options as attractive as we can for the flexibility providers of today, but also those ones that could be flexible. And maybe it's not their primary business case, but they could actually therefore be flexible, benefit the system, and also access the benefits of the energy transition.
Amazing. Thanks, Nick. So that's the UK so far. Could you dig down into the developments we've seen across Europe as well?
Yeah, I can take that. So yeah, keeping it fairly high level, as you can see, got 2 bullet points on the left there. So in the EU, I mean, obviously there's a few different ways it's being rolled out across the various countries, but in general, there's been a big push to increase the participation in demand response. So we saw a interesting report a couple of weeks back presented at the NLIT conference in Paris from Elia Group, who are the transmission system operator in Belgium and Northeast Germany. And that was basically about the power, well, they called it the power of flex, but it was enabling the consumer to benefit from the energy transition. And what came out of that was a few things, but one of them was providing data to the end consumer. So that's really about transparency and saying, you know, these are the opportunities, this is what you could be involved in. So to engage them, coupled with price signals and communicating that price signal back. So that coupled with things like the network code for demand side flexibility, which is currently under drafting with the EU, and I think it's a 2025 release. There's a real focus on demand response programs and markets across to Europe, and indeed the EU directive mandates that there should be a kind of markets first approach or market-based approach to flexibility to ensure that the flex is accessed at least cost, which actually rolls nicely into my second one on non-firm connections, or you know, the types of connections we have in the UK as an option for connecting parties. So potentially getting connected quicker, but with the caveat that it's non-firm in that you might be curtailed at various points. So again, in the EU, there are existing non-firm connection agreements in various countries, but there's not yet an alignment on it. And for example, in places like the Netherlands, there are no non-firm connections. So we have been following, let's say, numerous discussions on how those non-firm connections are aligned or otherwise to that idea that we should take a market-based approach to procuring flex. So that's about ensuring that we don't negatively impact the markets by allowing non-firm connections, or using that kind of curtailment option first. And for us, really, it's what we've said in the past a few times. If you've been kind of tracking our like approach to these things, it's about systems integration. So it's about having lots of different levers, so to speak, for the system operator. And the key part of that is to coordinate between the Flex market platform and things like non-firm connections and other aspects. So yeah, interesting discussion going on in Europe about how those two things align. And it's something that we are big on in terms of a more holistic approach to flexibility and whole systems thinking, so to speak, buzzwords, but it basically means that we're aligning the actions in the market with the other aspects at play. So I think those are the main things, at least in the last few months, that we've seen in Europe. And I guess for the US, I'll hand over to Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yes, we spent a bit of time in the US over this last year, learning where network utilities are on the journey to flexibility. And I guess just a bit of backdrop for those of you not familiar with the US market, we're seeing the same challenges and themes we've seen in the UK and Europe. So, interconnection queues for renewables are getting longer. It's getting harder to connect new LCTs, low carbon technologies, to the grid. The EV adoption rates are accelerating. So just like the UK and EU, this is leading to congestion on the grid, longer connection queues, and essentially slowing down the energy transition for the US. I think the main difference, though, is that there aren't any sort of dynamic price signals or markets for flexibility. So at the moment, if you're a flexibility provider, your options are mostly around tariffs, which are more fixed and more static. So it's harder to get the kind of maximum value out of your resources. But that is changing, but it's worth knowing that is where things are at the moment. And then in terms of some of the key themes and trends we're seeing in the US, so the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, is a huge stimulus that's going to be funding investments into clean energy as one of the areas that the money's going. And that means that for network utilities, they're investing increasingly into system reliability and resilience, of which flexibility plays a key part. So the behaviors of network utilities are changing thanks to the IRA bill. And then we're seeing things like virtual power plants, VPPs, emerge as one of the key tools that they're looking at to enhance that grid resilience and reliability. And VPPs can mean many things, but really it's just controlling a number of distributed assets and trading them or acting like a power plant and playing that into existing markets or offsetting other wholesale costs. So like the UK and Europe, where we're evolving into this DSO 2.0 world of integrated systems and automated systems, to use VPP at scale, you need to integrate network monitoring systems with distribution resource management systems and A&M systems, and still a lot of work to be done in the US and in UK and Europe too to make that happen. But I think the interesting difference in the US is that there are vertically integrated utilities who own the customers and own the wires, and so there is in theory more value on the table for those utilities to use VPP and to create these bundled propositions where you've got grid services and energy services and energy. So quite exciting. And although it's been slow today, I think we're going to see quite a lot of progress over the next year or two as they start to play catch up and, in some cases might even leapfrog some of the UK and Europe in that respect. And then in the last point, it's just around regulation. So to enable this transition and to empower flexible resources and clean technologies, there's some interesting regulation that's been pushed out. So in California, one of the most progressive states in the US for clean energy and the energy transition, they've launched their Net Energy Metering 3.0 initiative, which is going to allow for more granular metering of export in the home and to encourage and incentivize self-consumption before exporting to the grid, and more tailored time of use type tariffs for consumers, which again is going to help provide better price signals for aggregators and distributed resources. And then FERC 2222 is a federal order, so it applies nationally. And this is really similar to the P415 code change in the UK, and it's about allowing aggregated resources and aggregators to play into existing markets like utilities and suppliers can already do. So just like Nick was saying earlier, this just creates more opportunities, more options for providers of flexibility. So this should just stimulate more adoption of low carbon technologies and help to proliferate the rollout of things like EVs and heat pumps, and help support these new emerging business models around VPP and aggregators generally. So if you go to the next slide. So just wanted to touch a little bit on that evolution. I talked a little bit about it earlier. We're seeing in the UK and Europe, and with VPP, we're seeing it in the US too, this evolution of flexibility and how the DNO, or the DSO as it's becoming, can enable and unlock the value of flexibility. And if we think back to how things started in the early days of flexibility, it was really just bilateral contracts, one-to-one agreements between a network operator and, let's say, a large factory to turn down their consumption next year for a period of time. You know, a manual contract and emails and phone calls and spreadsheets to actually handle the dispatch and settlement of that when it gets around to that delivery window. Then we've seen the next generation, which is now the previous one, which streamlines some of those processes. You know, an enrollment portal, kind of a procurement tool where you can visualize where opportunities are if you're a provider, and you can register and onboard your assets. But when it comes to dispatching and settling, still heavily reliant on phone calls, emails, and spreadsheets, which has really created a ceiling operationally for doing flexibility at scale and to moving closer to real time when there is a lot of value left on the table for things like batteries and EVs, where it's much easier to commit tomorrow than it is next year. But to do that, you need to be able to run a DSO every day and forecast your needs and send those signals to markets. So to do all that, you do need to have a more connected ecosystem of technologies like our platform, Electron Connect, but also network monitoring systems and resource management systems, integrating that with the flexible resources, the providers, the aggregators, standardizing that, and potentially also third-party apps and consumer-facing apps. And this is all about making it easier for the system operators to run flexibility markets, reducing the manual effort, and making it easier for the providers of flex and the end consumers by lowering those barriers to entry and standardizing those interfaces. And that is really what we see as the next generation of flexibility, which is platforms like ours integrated with these network systems and engaging with the wider ecosystem with more standardization and more seamless interfaces. And we'll touch on that in a second when we talk about some of the key developments for us in Electron, which I think is the next slide. So yeah, just a couple of updates. So from us, a couple of really exciting developments. So first is the partnership with Corella, which you may have seen us push out on our LinkedIn and Twitter. So we've talked a lot about it, but we really need to unlock the value of low carbon flexibility at scale. And one of the best ways we can do that is to make the experience simpler and easier for everybody, for providers of flex, for the operators of the network. And part of that is providing an excellent customer service. And this is where Corella come in. So they already provide award-winning support and customer service for some of the GB's critical energy infrastructure. So they're running and supporting some critical applications today. And they're essentially bringing that service to local flexibility markets with our platform. So it's going to give us, Electron, more resources and support to help implement and support our customers in the UK and Europe. But it's also going to help provide a better experience to flexibility providers, more dedicated, more available, and bringing all the experience that Corella have in delivering that level of service. So really excited to bring that to life with our customers, existing and new, next year. And then the other great bit of news for us is we announced our Series A recently. So this is our latest funding round. It's a critical time for flexibility, and we believe that low carbon flexibility and a market-based approach is really critical to unlocking the energy transition, and it's probably the fastest and cheapest path to get there now. So this funding allows us to use all the amazing experience and the team and the product we've built to help that, to make that happen in the UK, but also to move into select new countries in Europe and the US, again, to bring all that experience and expertise and help customers in those new geographies accelerate the energy transition. So a really exciting time for us over the next couple of years. I'll hand over to Nick just for some updates on market and product developments.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so quickly two things on the kind of markets and projects we're involved with next year. So kind of two headlines is the first one, we are kicking off what's called the Flex Markets Unlocked Innovation Program with the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. And what we're proposing for that is actually kind of, well, is very much related to what we were talking about earlier, in terms of, on one side, you've got unique sets of challenges for the system operators at national and distribution level, and those therefore require those different organizations to build software tools that fit those needs. So they're building things which target those needs, and they solve their solutions for those problems on one side. So that's should be promoted. And then on the other side, you've got the flexibility for providers. And the trick there is that because you've got all these different systems that vary, it can become quite confusing and difficult to participate. So the barriers can be quite high, and it's kind of presents often a confusing picture. So this Flex Market Unlocked program that we're involved with, we are offering a solution set which basically allows that ecosystem of tools to exist per system operator at national and distribution level. So different portals for registration, for example, different flexibility market platforms, etc. But we are providing the kind of protocols and standards and what we're calling the kind of glue, I suppose, that enables participation from a variety of different provider types. The whole cross section, it gives them a much more unified view of what's going on. So rather than saying we should replace everything with one monolithic platform, which won't work for anyone, we're saying that it's very good and proper that system operators have their own solutions that solve their needs. And then we need that much more distributed architecture as it is to link up the various different flexibility providers to those systems and present them in such a way that the barriers to entry are much lower. So that's kicking off, and we'll be looking for a variety of stakeholder engagement on that across all different organizations involved in the flexibility landscape. And then I know obviously we're coming up to time, so I won't overdo it because I could speak for 20 minutes at least on BuyTrader, of course. But we will be releasing or launching our first BuyTrader market in the ENWL license area. So this is kind of a call to action in January and August. If anyone has resources, assets in that area, they can come along and get involved. But basically, BuyTrader is a market design, an innovative market design, which basically allows connected customers to trade their curtailment obligation. So bilateral trading through which those customers can trade their position in that curtailment order. So if anyone is interested in it, has resources, assets in the ENWL license area, then please reach out to us. You can search BuyTrader, of course, as well to find out more details. We haven't got time to go through now, but yeah, certainly if that's of interest, get involved. But that's yeah, everything from my side.
Because I just say as well, a shout out to ENW. They are, when we talk about the DSO 2.0 vision, they're building that kind of connected ecosystem. So it's really cool to see a DSO in the UK making that happen.
Perfect, thank you. We are coming up to time, so I think the questions that have come through, will circulate those afterwards. But thank you for your time today. It's been great to kick off the webinar series. If you are at Distributech in the US next year or the Distributed Energy Show in the UK, we'd love to catch up with you. So you can either scan the QR code there or reach out to one of the team if you already know us. And we'd love to catch up with you. But thank you very much for your time, and have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.